What's your creepiest glitch in the Matrix or unexplainable thing that's ever happened to you? 1985. My ex-wife and I were sleeping. There was a small sliver of light coming in through the window from a street light, so the room and bed were dimly visible. Our black Pomeranian was at the end of the bed asleep. I dreamt that I woke up, reached down to pet him, and he turned into a glossy black bivalve oyster thing which opened up to reveal rows of gleaming glass teeth. I woke up to my ex backpedaling up the bed over the pillows towards the wall. I asked what's wrong. He said, "What is that shiny black clam thing with the teeth at the end of the bed? Where's the dog?" We had had the same nightmare at the same time. This still gives me a chill. I once clocked out of work at 6 PM, like I always did at the time, and began my hour-long train ride home. After I had found a seat, I went to sleep and woke up just before my station. From the station, it is a short bus journey, 10-15 minutes, to reach home. During the entire journey, I didn't use my phone and I don't wear a watch, so I didn't really notice the time anywhere. When I reached home, my family surprised me with "You're home early. Everything alright?" I look at the wall clock and it is about to be 6 PM. I was too shocked to understand what happened. Checked other watches, cell phones etc, and the time is absolutely right. A few days later, the admin emailed us the timesheets for the month. Times clocking in and out, and every single days for me was around the same 6 PM. So it certainly wasn't me having left work earlier. To this date, I haven't figured out how I gained between 60-90 minutes that day. Edit 1. Wow. Thank you for the pirate silver matties. This is most popular comment ever. Gained an hour or so, and some karma to go with it. Edit 2. The most common theory in comments seems to be the DST, and I have considered it before. The problem is that it should work for both time in and time out, and if I remember, the time in was the same as always and I didn't leave my home early for work. If I remember right, it also wasn't a Monday, which is when the clock reset effects come through at work despite the changes going in on Sunday. I was working on my motorcycle in a dirt lot where I had crashed it trying to do a sick drift, breaking off the clutch lever and the gear shifter. I had brought a wrench set with me and I was using one of them to take off a bolt when I put it down on the ground to finish unscrewing the bolt with my hand. 2 minutes later I went to pick it back up and it was gone. I ran all around this dirt lot looking for it to no avail. Luckily I had a spare in the car, fixed the bike and drove back to my apartment to shower as I was filthy. I walked in my room and sitting on my desk was the wrench. I was dumbfounded. I was driving about 50 miles per hour, and a car ran a stop sign on an on-ramp and pulled out right in front of me. I remember bracing for impact, and then I was about 300 yards down the highway and I saw the car at the ramp in my rear view, just about to pull out. I've told this story before and could go into a ton of detail, but here's the short version. I am 100% sure I vividly remember a dog that apparently doesn't exist. When I was 16 we lived on the other side of the province and my uncle had this little Jack Russell named Crew. Crew went missing for several months and then turned up at a humane society over an hour away, and we were all shocked this little dog has made it so far. Anyway, that was almost 20 years ago, and the other day I was talking to my parents and was like, you know, whenever I hear about Jack Russells I think about Crew and that stunt he pulled, and they had no idea what I was talking about. Insisted my uncle had never had such a dog. I must have dreamed it. etc. Honestly, anyone else who would have remembered this dog has been dead for a long time, and I don't even have any pictures of my uncle. I have absolutely no way to prove this dog existed, but I'm sure that he did. I was walking my dog and I was almost to the driveway when I looked down for some reason, and I looked back up and I ended up being back at the road about 6 blocks away from where I thought I was. I was so confused, but my dog looked completely fine. For your information, I don't drink or do drugs. I'm still pretty young. Taking the trash out at night. Super remote area, so I know for a fact we're the only ones around here. Getting close to the road and I hear very clearly "help me" from a female voice. Even knowing there's such a slim chance of there being another living person around, I still feel like I should look around and check it out in case I wasn't just hearing things and someone actually needs help. Take about 2 steps in the direction I thought I heard it. Hear a giggle in the same exact voice. Turn around and walk promptly back up the driveway because duck that it. Anyone who actually needed help wouldn't be laughing. I don't think. I remember driving my car to this intersection in this rural area and I'm checking both sides because of terrible blind spots. In the corner of my eye my mother is sitting there and says something like it's all clear my way. I look back and she isn't there. My mother had been dead for a few years at this point. This was also in the middle of the day and I've never had it happen since. Edit. Wow, my first award. Thanks. My friend Sarah was in a nightclub, drunk off her face, when she got an overwhelming urge to tell a total stranger that her leg hurts. Edit. It didn't. All a bit strange. She ignores it but it doesn't stop, so she walks up to this guy and says, I know this is crazy but I've got a huge urge to tell you my leg hurts. I know that's crazy. Again. Sorry. But he bursts into tears. Turns out his dad had just died and they made a pact before that if there was an afterlife he would get a message to him saying a totally random phrase, so there could be no mistakes. Which they decided was I either hurt my leg. I have a good one. I was about 12 years old and woke up in the middle of the night needing to take a leak. I walked across the hall to the little bathroom, hit the lights, and was about to reach for the toilet when I glanced up and saw a face in the mirror. It was not my face. It was as if someone was on the other side, standing to the right, with their face right next to the glass, staring at me. I only saw it for the briefest moment, but it is seared into my brain. I screamed and ran out of there to find my dad. Of course, my dad investigated, then calmed me down, or tried to. Eventually we had a prayer session. Because I was so freaked out, eventually I must have gone back to sleep. Fast forward to my 30s. I'd forgotten all about the event. One night while visiting, my dad quietly brings it up. Remember that one time you saw a face in the mirror? It suddenly came back to me in a rush of memory, sending a chill down my spine. Yay, I remember. Well, he said, I sometimes think about that night. He looked down at the floor with a serious expression. I saw it too. He went on to describe exactly what I'd seen. We have no idea what that was. Apparently when he investigated, he saw it and had a freak out of his own. Apparently the prayer session was as much for his own nerves as mine. I respect him for keeping that tidbit from me till my 30s, but I kinda wish he'd never told me. My wife passed away a year ago today. Had some odd things happen, like a couple of old meaningful pictures show up that I swore were in storage. The strangest one was I vacuumed the carpet and as soon as I was done a diamond ring was on the ground right where I had just cleaned. It was like she was saying, hey, this one is real, don't lose it. Around 12 years old I was watching Megas XLR, or something that was on at the time. Sitting there I noticed that the sun just turned off. Like completely. I was real confused. Opened the blinds and it was dark. Show was still at the same spot, but the clock on the cable box said it was 5 hours later. My best guess for what happened was that I passed out without realizing it, like those nights where you lay in bed and blink and suddenly it's morning. So I'm guessing I fell asleep sitting up for exactly enough time to have Cartoon Network play a rerun of the show get to the exact spot I fell asleep at. Was surreal though. I shared this a few years ago when this question was asked last time, and didn't really realize how glitchy in the matrix it was until people started commenting haha. In college, I took a hard news soft news journalism class where one of the assignments was to write an obituary for one of my grandparents. The professor told us to write it on a deceased grandparent, but if all of your grandparents were still alive we had to choose one. In my case, all of my grandparents were alive. I procrastinated actually doing the assignment until the night before it was due because it seemed like a morbid assignment, especially once all of my grandparents were still alive. Scramming for an easy grandparent to write about, I gave my mom a call and asked her for some basic biographical information about my maternal grandfather. As we were talking about my grandpa's career, my mom couldn't recall the name of one of the companies he worked at. She lectured me about waiting until the last minute to write the assignment because it was late, 10:30 PM my grandpa's time. However, she said she would give him a call to see if he was still awake and be able to answer that question once my assignment was due the following morning. When my mom called my grandpa, my grandma answered the phone in a panic. My grandma frantically explained that the paramedics had just arrived and were performing CPR on my grandpa because he had stopped breathing and lost consciousness. My mom was able to stay on the phone with my grandma until they took my grandpa to the hospital, where he was declared dead. In the time my mom and I had been talking on the phone about my grandpa's obituary, he was dying. His death was entirely unexpected at that. Although he was in his 80s, he was the healthiest of my grandparents at the time. We ended up using the obituary I wrote for that writing assignment as his actual obituary. Still freaks me out when I think about the timing. I had just pulled into the parking lot of where I worked and was walking towards the building. It was like 3 in the afternoon. Broad daylight. All of a sudden, I heard an ambulance's siren start sounding. Naturally, I looked down the road to try and see the ambulance. I see it approaching and decided to watch it for a bit. It was quickly getting closer, and it was about to pass right by me. However, there was a large SUV waiting to turn out of the parking lot and onto the road, blocking a few meters of the road from my view. The ambulance passed behind the SUV, probably about 50 feet away from me at most, and I vividly remember the siren becoming completely silent in that instant. The ambulance had vanished entirely as it passed behind that SUV. I was so confused. The road did not have many cars on it at the time, and it was broad daylight. I did a triple take and made sure that I didn't just miss it. I had a clear view of the road going both directions, and there was no more ambulance to be seen. No more siren either. I walked up and down the road, trying to find it for a solid minute, but nope, it was gone. I was well rested, not on drugs, and I didn't have a history of hallucinations. It seems dismissible, but I was completely aware of what happened, and I can't explain it to this day. When the song The Final Countdown was released in the 80s, I already knew it. It was brand new, just released, but I knew the tune and the words and could sing the whole thing beginning to end. I believed for a while that it was a cover version, but it wasn't. So this has always bothered me. I was 13 years old at the time and my dad was a coal miner. He worked third shift, known as the hotel shift, which was midnight to noon. As such, he got home around 2 PM and slept till around 9. Got up, had dinner with us and left for work. My dad was always pretty gruff and constantly yelled at us if my younger brother or I made too much noise and woke him up after getting home from somewhere, which as an adult now I completely understand. So one day I did something to wake him up. I forget what. Anyways, he calls me back to the bedroom and I'm expecting to get a dressing down, but he just looked at me and said, "It's okay. Come over here and give me a hug." What 13-year-old boy wants to hug their dad? I kinda squirmed a bit and he followed up with, "What if something happened to me?" and just laid there all grizzled and tired. I didn't hug him. That night there was an accident in the mine. He saved everyone on his crew, including the one person he went back in for. His was the only death, and I'm convinced he knew it was gonna happen. I'll never forget his eyes that day. If someone asked you for a hug, give it to them. I love you, Dad. Edit. My very first gold. I'm so glad this resonated with someone. Second edit. This obviously resonated with more than one person. Words can't express how much I appreciate it. Thank you to everyone that shared their own stories of loss. I'm trying to read them all. If I miss one, I'm sorry. Thank you for sharing your story. About 2 years ago, I went to collect my husband from the ferry after work. My husband got into the car and as I was driving very slowly out of the car park, we both noticed two people standing a few meters in front of our car. It looked as though they were strangers, older looking professionals, both walking to their separate cars in different areas of the car park. The man was reaching into his side bag and the lady was further ahead than the man, with her head turned to the right. I know the exact positions they were in because they were completely frozen on the spot. My husband and I sat there watching the frozen strangers, not saying anything to each other, and then all of a sudden it was like someone pressed play and the two strangers just continued on like nothing had happened. My husband and I promised to each other that we would never forget how weird the experience was. I can't remember exactly how long they stayed frozen like that, but it was long enough to freak us both out. Around 12 years ago I had a dark purple 3 Series BMW which I drove to work and parked in the same spot for around 3 years. I sold the car due to mileage and wanting something a little more reliable and purchased a different car. 1 week later, I turn up to work to find my purple BMW parked in my parking spot. I was totally WTF. Turns out that we had a work experience kid start that day, and his dad had dropped him off in my old car that he bought 2 days earlier. What are the chances of that? I've never met this kid or his dad, and yet here was my old car in my space. Edit. My most popular comment ever. Lots of people saying it may be Techno Schwartz, but I'm pretty sure it was Violet Schwartz. Here's a picture, although it looks way more navy here than in real life, from my potato camera in September 2006, my wife just saw me uploading this and asked what I was doing. We were dating when I had this car and started telling me how much she loved it. Bless it. I think most of the people here have experienced the something falls down and seemingly disappears thing, but the exact opposite happened to me a couple of months ago. Basically, me and a bunch of friends were standing in a circle in our school's hallway when suddenly we heard something fall. We all simultaneously looked at the floor, and there was a small, silver, foreign coin, Swiss I think, just laying there. I picked it up and asked if any of them had dropped it, and they all denied. I looked around and there was nowhere it could have come from, and the hallway was empty, so there was no one who could have thrown it. Later we joked that someone in Switzerland probably dropped it and is now frantically looking for it. I still have the coin in my locker, so if anyone wants pictures, I can take some when Monday rolls around. Edit. Here are the pictures. From what I've gathered, it's a 20 Rappen coin. I've told this on Reddit before, but here it is. I had a very important document that I only ever kept in one place. I kept it in the top drawer of a small filing cabinet. I never moved it and would always see it in that drawer whenever I opened it for whatever reason. The day came that I needed it now and I didn't sweat it because I knew exactly where it was. Well, I'd be damned if it wasn't there. Cue panic attack. I tore that filing cabinet up. I removed everything and spread it out. Flipped papers over, dug through envelopes, shook everything out, shined a flashlight all through the emptied cabinet in case it was somehow stuck to the sides. I mean, it was not there. I can assure you no one took it or was messing with me. I was so frustrated. I even looked through other parts of my house, but I knew it wouldn't be in any of those places and it wasn't. I was intermittently going back to that dumb filing cabinet. No luck. Super irritated, I searched the rest of the house again and, on my way back downstairs where my filing cabinet was, I called out in frustration, "Okay, bring it back." I don't know who I thought I was talking to because I was alone, but you guessed it, I found it in the top drawer of my filing cabinet where it should have been in the first place. I was relieved and totally freaked out. Edit. Thanks for the silver. Edit. Thanks for the gold. It's an odd thing where people close to me talk about things I was previously thinking of before I see them. 2 things. Each was witnessed by at least one other person and both were while driving. One's at a stop sign in a neighborhood. All of these little sparkles started swirling around in midair roughly 3-4 ft off the ground out of nowhere. The group of them were roughly 2 feet wide by 3-4 ft tall. It lasted 3-5 seconds and then they were gone. No one was around and when I asked my passenger if he saw it too, he breathed a sigh of relief and said yes. We spoke about it a little more but there is no reasonable explanation. The second happened when myself and 3 friends were driving down an empty country road. Very straight stretch. A man on a bike appeared. Someone said to watch out for him, so not to hit him, and then he disappeared. Our minds were blown to say the least. Just poof and he's gone. After my little brother was murdered the next morning, I was talking with a friend and he mentioned this other dude I went to high school with younger brother had died in a car accident a couple weeks before. Later that day I pull out a slip of paper with this other dude's number and name on it from my pants. I vaguely remember running into him a year or so before this at a club where he gave me his number. I swear I had worn and washed these jeans at least a dozen times since I had run into this dude. I still makes no sense how that paper was there and I only found it then. I call the dude and we talked a bunch. It really helped me deal with the situation. I always have weird visions or I'll see something in a dream, but I won't notice that I've seen it. Then like a week or so after I'll see the exact same thing. Almost like deja vu, but not quite, since it hasn't actually happened before. It would always be something so specific, and it has happened multiple times, so it can't just be a strange coincidence. Edit. It's very reassuring to see all the stories of people experiencing the same thing. Assures me that I'm not going insane. Or maybe many others are just going insane with me. I won't be able to read them all as my phone's being blown up with them, but I'll try my best. A total of 3 times in my life I have had memories of seeing movie trailers that hadn't been made yet. It's not even a feeling of deja vu. It's a clear, vivid memory of seeing the movie before. Edit. The movies were The Blind Side, Devil and Prometheus. Every time I drop something and it literally disappears to nothingness. Like WTF. Every night I go to bed about 2 hours before my husband. I always wake up when he comes into the room. One night he was gaming with a friend, and it was hours later I heard him sneak into the room and crawl across the floor so he could pop up and scare me. I felt the floor kind of shake and felt him bump clumsily against the side of the bed in the dark. I held out my hand and asked him not to scare me. I was already scared enough and begged him to just take my hand and come to bed. I couldn't see anything in the room, but knew he was there and just waited for him to jump up so I could move on and go back to sleep. That's when I heard him talking to his friend in the other room. I was frozen. I know there's sleep paralysis or lucid dreaming or something that explains this, but I would have sworn on my son's life that someone had crawled across the floor and jostled the bed. Eventually I worked out of the fear enough to grab my phone and text my husband to come in and turn on the lights and check under the bed. But holy it boggles me how real it felt. Eater, thank you for the silver. It's my first. Thank you to everyone who's confirmed sleep paralysis. Kind of comforting to have that as the answer. Maybe if it happens again that knowledge will help. Also, it was likely inspired by watching Markiplier play Don't Open Your Eyes. Sleep with your doors shut. Kids, you'll thank me later. 3 Scary Games number 36. So, this might be hard to explain. I was probably 12 and lived in a big log cabin. One day while my parents were at work, I got in a fight with my brother, 18, who had some anger issues. He chased me through the house and I ran out one door, around our porch and in through another door. I was going to lock it behind me but didn't have time because he was too close behind me. So, I slammed the door behind me and kept running. When I glanced back to see if he had made it through the door yet, he was banging on the window of said door and yelling for me to unlock it. The door was locked and there was no he had locked it, because the door could only be locked from the outside with a key, of course. Our parents never gave us keys. There was also no way the door could have accidentally locked when I slammed it behind me, because it needed to be fully turned to lock, and usually required some finagling at the end to make it actually lock. I stood there dumbfounded for a few seconds and then ran to a bathroom and locked myself in there. Definitely feel that saved me that day. Edit. The door only had a deadbolt, which could only be locked from the outside with a key, but from the inside you had to turn the knob. Suppose I worded that in a confusing way. I was reading Kurt Vonnegut's last book, Timequake, and had put it in my backpack to read while on the bus. I left the house and for some reason about a block later I thought to myself, did I put the book in my bag? I looked and it wasn't there. Went back to the house and couldn't find it. Retraced my steps to where I turned around and it was nowhere to be found. I never found the book again, and gave up on trying to get another copy. I think it was Vonnegut's way of telling me it wasn't worth the read. This summer I bought my girlfriend a last-minute birthday trip to go kayaking around the San Juan Islands off the Washington state coast. After a long drive and ferry trip, we found the tour group of about 20 people and were then shuffled into a shuttle van for a ride to the beach. Now, my girlfriend has a unique name similar to the name of a famous painter. Let's say it's Rebecca Warhol just for fun. It's not. She's a little ray of sunshine. And started chatting with the middle-aged woman sitting next to her on the shuttle as we waited to leave. The woman noted that she had always loved the name Rebecca, as it was her mother's name. They made pleasant small talk in the van until the tour guide passed around the sign-in sheet for all of us to fill out. That's when things got strange. My girlfriend wrote her full name on the sheet and passed it on to the woman, who immediately shouted "Oh my god," and started crying. After a few minutes of total confusion, She told us Rebecca Warhol was my mother's full name, and these islands were her favorite place in the world. She passed away this summer from cancer and we've traveled hundreds of miles to spread her ashes here. We were stunned. I literally picked a random date, time, and tour company, and then we were split into the same group as this woman and my girlfriend was sitting right next to her on the shuttle. What the hell? She continued by saying, my daughter told us that Nana Rebecca would be with us on this trip, and I didn't believe it until now. It was the most unbelievable coincidence we had ever experienced, and has totally convinced me that there's more to this world than we think. As my brother later said, the universe winked at us that day. I was on vacation on Florida visiting a friend. We were walking on the beach on a perfectly sunny day when everything went black for a second. I think it was weird but explained it away thinking that my eyes were playing tricks on me until he looked at me and said, did everything go black for a second? It isn't creepy, but when I was in high school I had a dream I was in all white classroom, totally white, like the ones you would see in a dream, and a girl was sitting in the chair on my side. During the dream, I knew it was a dream because that girl was a senior. We didn't have common classes. About 6 years later, I was at a master class. The sun was shining bright outside. The classroom was very illuminated, and I see this girl on my side. We are doing masters together and having a class in all white ducking classroom. Of course I remembered the dream at that very moment. Edit. Woo 6k upvotes guys. Edit 2. My first award. Thanks. I don't personally remember this, but I would see my dead grandfather all the time when I was a kid. From the ages of 7-9 there was probably 10 different incidents. My dad was an absolute pansy when it came to ghosts, which I don't really believe in, and wanted to take me to the doctor. My dad had one of those bathrooms with a separate toilet room and no one that lived in the house closed the bathroom door unless they were bathing. I was playing RuneScape and my dad asked why the bathroom door was closed, and I said it's because grandpa's in there. That's the only one I actually remember. There was maybe 2 other bathroom incidents and some incidents when I would sit on the floor and watch TV with my dad and he would tell me to go sit in the, what was once my grandfather's, chair and said I couldn't because grandpa was sleeping. I don't know how creepy these are tbh, but they freaked out my family for sure. Probably going to get buried, but I met someone who no longer seems to exist. In October 2018, I developed tendonitis in my hand, so I went to see a hand specialist at my regular hospital. I remember the hand specialist really clearly. She was a really happy, talkative Vietnamese woman with straight, dark brown hair and glasses. She had a German sounding last name, which I assumed was her married name. She was really nice and we had a long conversation about a medical conference that she goes to. She explained that my hand issues, caused by phone usage, were the hot topic of the conference and that she'd probably use my injury as an example when she goes there. Anyway, she gave me care instructions and sent me home. I was told to return if it didn't resolve in a few weeks because then I'd need to be re-examined and sent to physical therapy. It didn't resolve and I went back. I had an appointment with the same doctor, but the woman who came into the room was completely different. She was a white woman with light brown hair, no glasses, completely different face shape, really dull and unwelcoming disposition. I was so ducking confused. I asked her name, and she gave the same name the Asian doctor had. I asked if there was another doctor by that name and she told me no. It was only her. I described the doctor I had seen and she got annoyed and said she didn't know who I was talking about. I later went online to the hospital's staff directory and tried to find the Asian doctor. I couldn't. I have no idea what happened to her. I even checked my medical records to see if maybe I remembered her name incorrectly, but I didn't. Both of my visits have the same doctor's name on them. I've always been confused about this and it really bothers me that I met someone who doesn't seem to exist anymore. Edit. Thanks for the Silver and Mind Blown award. To answer some questions, I couldn't tell if the white doctor actually remembered me. When I told her that I was confused about the situation, she just looked at my chart, confirmed that my previous appointment had been with her, and told me that she'd seen me before. I wasn't under the impression that she actually remembered me. I didn't ask a lot of questions because she seemed extremely annoyed with me, like I was wasting her time and she just wanted the appointment to be over. I'm sure that I sounded insane, so I don't blame her for her bad attitude. I don't think the Asian doctor ever told me the name of the conference. She just said that it was a conference for hand specialists, so I haven't been able to look it up. Also, someone asked me if I was intoxicated during the first visit. No, I wasn't. I don't drink or do drugs. Lot of people have said that it might have been a student intern resident or a physician's assistant. My hospital doesn't have students except in the pharmacy, as far as I know, but I agree that it could have been a physician's assistant. I'm not 100% convinced because I rechecked the hospital's directory of doctors just now, and even though PAs are listed, I still couldn't find the Asian doctor, but it's 2020, so maybe she doesn't work there anymore. I also tried to describe the first doctor to the second one and she cut me off and told me she didn't know who I was talking about. But maybe she lied? Part of me thinks that this is like the Berenstein-Berestin thing, and at some point, I got switched from the Asian doctor reality to the white doctor reality.